it.
To our listeners outside, we say good morning to you all, and it's nice thanking you for always joining us and remaining with us. It is time for Political Platform. I am Adebayo Bodurin. Amishi is a little bit busy this morning. He will be with us tomorrow. And what a way to begin by letting you know that after much pressure, the President of the Federation, President Muhammadu Buhari, embarked on a trip across the country yesterday. His first port of call was, of course, Jalingo, where he went to commiserate with the victims of the killings that have taken place in the early part of this year and as recent as last week. Of course, he was and that trip. He's also planning to go to other places, including River State. But many are saying that, reading politics into it, the PDP kick against the visit, saying that it's belated and that the president ought to have visited most of those places immediately the killings were recorded. Well, it is better late than not being done at all. But the president did not visit the IDP camps, and of course the victims themselves. We only address the leaders of the state. That is Taraba State yesterday. We are expecting him when he will resume the visits to other parts, which he has promised, Zamfara, Benue, and others, and rivers. The PDP is kicking and saying that it is a political gambit aimed at shoring up the president's popularity ahead of 2019 election. Whether it is for politics or not for politics, the good thing is that the president is back on that trip, at least to sympathize with those who are falling victims of the wave of killings across the country. And of course, yesterday is very sad development in my Tama district of Abuja yesterday. The infighting, or do we call it infighting, or do we call it battle for supremacy among us, our security agencies, was also witnessed yesterday evening as security operatives armed to the teeth invaded the residence of the former DG, Director General of NIA. And of course, the move, from what we gather, I was physically there myself to see what happened. They were armed to the teeth at Osara Close. The Osara Close, the house is number 3, Osara Lane, off Osara Close. And they were there. What was the mission? The mission is to evict the former DG, Mohammed Dauda. The question you will ask is, why should such a move be made at all? Knowing fully well, the man was, from what we gather, he has not been served quit notice. He is not known to have been retired. And security operative invaded his house to evict himself and his members of his family from the house where he is staying. I think there are better ways, decent ways of handling some of this matter, even if there are infighting. Knowing fully well that Mohammed Dauda was the one who petitioned, who wrote a petition against some indecent acts which he perceived took place immediately he handed over. And if that infighting within the security agency will lead to a situation where armed men, armed to the teeth, if you need to see them on the streets of Osara Close yesterday, you would think perhaps there is a war that was already going on there. And we believe there are decent ways of handling some of this matter. And former President Olusegun Obasanjo was 81 years old yesterday. Although he said he told us that he doesn't know when he was born. He used the market days, which was the common thing in those days, to calculate his age, and he has 2 regrets. One, the death of his parents, and of course, He spoke in a manner that you ask whether he himself too is not guilty of what he says is regretting over, that there is no good leadership in Africa. He has been president, he has been military head of state, he has played key roles across the continent of Africa. And if at 81 is full of regrets that there is no good leadership in Africa, will he not share part of the blame? Think about it. And the PDP had a meeting in faraway Gombe, and the meeting is raising issues and questions on the motive behind that meeting. The meeting was a meeting of some selected governors of the PDP. Some governors stay away from the meeting. Some national working committee members of the party attended the meeting. The national chairman and some others stay away from the meeting. The question you will ask is a crisis brewing in the PDP where there is a meeting that is attended by some, boycotted by some. I think in the next few days ahead, we'll be analyzing the outcome of that meeting, because it signals that something is already brewing within the PDP again. Knowing fully well that just last weekend, some key members, foundation members of the PDP, the first national secretary of the PDP, Jerry Ghana, left the party and went and pitched his tent with SDP. And it's a thing that we watch out for and see how it will play out. It seems that there is no smoke without fire. Uju Ejeye is on the platform.
Adebayo Bodunri, let me begin by saying that it is a good thing that eventually the president got round to visiting victims of herders, farmers clashes and other forms of killings across the country. I think that wedding party in Kano, the criticism actually got to the presidency, and he knew he had to make that move. But I think that just for the future, I don't pray that we see disaster, crisis in the country, but it's always good to act promptly. He didn't have to wait for people to begin to criticize him because of that wedding before he makes the move that is necessary. He's a father, and it is required of a father to empathize, to sympathize with the people anytime that they are going through pains and sufferings. If you look at even Trump, as even though he may not be a favorite president in the US, you saw what happened when the ex-student of a school gunned down 17 students. He had a meeting with them. He shared in their pains. The other time too that there was a hurricane in Florida, he was there personally helping to evacuate the victims. That's the mark of a leader. I know that our president doesn't have to be in all the places, but let him do enough to let the people know that he's a man who truly loves this country. But let that love show, because some people, no matter how much you tell them you love them, until you practicalize it, they will not believe you. And as for the invasion of the house of the former DG of the NIA and the forced eviction, I think that honestly, I don't know how one will put it, but it doesn't augur well for our system at all. There has to be more decent ways, like you said, of doing things. The security agencies, these are people who are in office to enforce the rule of law, and they should start living by example. If the security agencies are the ones doing things contrary to what they should be propagating, then we have a very serious problem in this country. We must endeavor to live by the rule of law. No matter the intra-fighting, the rule of law must prevail. There are decent ways of doing things.
Yeah, decent way of doing things, and we do hope that there are decent ways and decent way of even detaining people. Tony EZIMAKO is still in detention, and the DSS is not speaking. It's not telling us its offense, and we have a feeling that these are not the decent ways of doing things.
Of course, certainly not.
Journalists play a very key role. Some even lost their life in fighting for this democracy. A lot were detained, and they suffered humiliation. Some lost their jobs. Some lost members of their family in the process. Some were even bombed, like Bagadakato in Kaduna. And so if journalists are
some were put in underground prisons.
Yes, and you see a situation where a journalist is arrested 1 week after, nobody is saying anything, and you just kept him there as if he's a criminal. These are civil offences.
Meanwhile, the law says not for more than 48 hours.
Even if he has committed criminal offence, the first to do is to charge him to court, not to keep him in such a way that members of his family don't have access to him. His lawyer has to speak out before they allow him to take his drugs because he's hypertensive. So would they be happy that we witness a situation where a journalist will die in detention? Well, we'll be taking a look at this much later. But for now, let's take your mails.
This is the mail segment, and I am Ifeanyi Nwobi.
I am Usaitin Yari. We begin today writing on the arrest of the Daily Independent journalist, Mr. EZIMAKO. Shegu Banso in Abuja says the arrest and continued detention of the bureau chief of Daily Independent by the DSS over a story he reported is reprehensible, a serious threat to democracy and a violation of our constitution and the United Nations 1948 Declaration, which recognizes the freedom of speech without interference. The Department of State Security Service should jettison its culture of impunity and release Mr. EZIMAKO unconditionally in accordance to our constitution, as the department itself is a product of our constitution.
And then reacting to President's trip across the country, Collins Eze in Kubwa, Abuja says, the Ait Political Platform crew, after delaying for so long, President Buhari yesterday commenced a much-needed visit to the crisis-prone states, especially in the northeast. As much as this visit is both necessary and long overdue, much will not be achieved if true and practicable steps are not taken to reconcile the parties involved. For instance, government should encourage and help to establish ranches for modern and proper ranching, as it is done in other climes. Government should fish out and prosecute both the bad eggs among the herders, who are usually armed with sophisticated weapons, and also the source of their weapons. Government must secure people's farmland within Benue, Taraba, and other food-producing states in the north, as well as their communities, and also the herders and their cows from rustlers. Government must begin sensitization and training of the herders on the need to embrace modern ranching. Finally, the government must also be ready to assist and subsidize all that is required to implement the above suggestions. I pledge peace.
More reactions. Swanu Prince in Port Harcourt, Rivers State says the late decision of President Buhari to officially visit some troubled states across the country is a welcome development. We, however, expect a president who rode on the back of the people to Aso Rock to remain pro-people and always act in their best interest, instead of ignoring them only to wine and dine with his elite's friends at strange occasions. At this point, it shouldn't just be about the visits, but actions that will bring expected solutions. President Buhari must take practical, proactive steps to ensure there's improvement in the general security situation in the country and ensure the safe return of all those in Boko Haram captivity.
And on electoral matters, Barrister Chukwuezigo Ogwu in Abuja says, I'm really not impressed that INEC set up a committee to investigate underage registration and voting. INEC is supposed to be investigated for registering underage voters. They can't be judged in their own case. Civil society, Nigerian Bar Association, the media and foreign diplomats should have made a better team to investigate this, and not INEC that started the whole problem. God bless Nigeria.
That's it on the Bill segment today. Continue to write to us through political platform at yahoo.com.
Welcome back. We're focusing on the arrest and detention of Tony EZIMAKO, the bureau chief of Daily Independent newspaper. The only person that has been able to have access to him is his lawyer, Douglas Ekato. And Douglas Ekato is joining us now. Yeah, thanks for joining us on Political Platform.
Yes, thank you. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. How is Tony? Were you able to have access to him? Were you allowed to see him?
Yes, I'm allowed to see him whenever I want to see him. And I was with him yesterday evening. Yesterday Monday, I was with him in the evening.
How is he? What is his spirit?
that he was strong, that he's high, his spirit, but however, he's in a very bad shape health-wise. Because just about 30 minutes before I got there yesterday evening, he had a checkup because he has been a hypertensive patient. So his blood pressure was taken, measured, and it was very high, very, very high. Very, very high. And I didn't like it, the way he was looking when I met him that yesterday evening.
Was he able? Were you able to take his drug to him? Since he says it's hypertensive.
Yes. He has his drugs, but the drugs really, at the moment, do not seem to be having positive effect.
Okay, you believe he needs more than the drug right now because of the delay?
Definitely, because it's about the place being kept exposed to mosquitoes and to the elements.
What? Have you been told his offense?
Sorry?
Have you been told his offense as his lawyer? Have you been told his offense?
No, I have not been officially informed, but from the discussions I have had with the officials there.
Yeah, what did they say?
He has sent to the publication. He told me the morning when I was with him that they said that they will be charging him for lying, false publication, and endangering Nigeria. But when I met him on Sunday, he was crying. He was broken down. He told me that they threatened that they were going to charge him for terrorism if he does not cooperate with them and if he does not tell them the source of his information or do an outright retraction of the story. He was worried.
They tried to charge him for terrorism, for simply writing a report.
Yes, he told me that they told him that if he does not retract or tell them source of his information, they will be charging him for terrorism.
And what are you, with the management of Daily Independent newspaper and yourself, what steps are you taking to secure his freedom?
Yes, we are working hard on it. We have a lot of legal options we have lined up. Because we already started taking them. But much of it I don't want to say to the public because these are for strategic purposes.
Okay, but were you able to meet with the authorities of the DSS?
Yes. He was taken in on Wednesday last week. By Thursday morning, I had a meeting with the director of operations. After that, I had a meeting with somebody from the Liga. And every day I go there, I discuss with them. Except yesterday morning, when I went to meet the man in charge of his interrogation, I wanted to speak with him and to know what next I should expect from them. The man said he was too busy that he was not going to talk with me. And I observed that his countenance yesterday was not so good. He was visibly angry. But the reason he didn't tell me.
All right. Did you also make them realize the fact that they are trampling on his fundamental human rights? One, they have delayed him for more than 48 hours. Two, hello, just a second.
I expecting that I will be rushing to court to file in paper for the enforcement of his fundamental human rights. So they know.
Are they also aware that in journalism that the law protects a journalist from not revealing the source of his story if he attributes it to a source, that he's protected?
Very well. In fact, Mr. Tommy has said that dozens of times. If at this time they call him for continuous interrogation, he keeps sounding it. And I myself, I have told them this repeatedly. Each time I go there and I discuss with them, except yesterday morning that he didn't allow me to discuss with him. I have always said this, that look, journalism is a profession that has its ethics, that governs his practice. One of such is for the practitioner not to divulge the source of his information. guide on is coming from. Like the Wall Street Journal. I even told them, I said, look, he has told you the Wall Street Journal. They said yes that they have seen it. They are not doubting it. But that there are some other individuals, some places where he said anonymous, but that they should explain who those people are. I said, no, this is not practicable in journalism. I'm a lawyer, but I have some idea about the practice of journalism and its ethics.
Yeah, finally, what about his family, his children, and the wife? Have you visited them too?
Oh my God, the wife is distressed. The wife is distressed. In fact, I had to reach a conclusion that I will no longer take the wife to him. On Sunday, when the wife went there, she was crying. Mr. Tony was crying. In fact, we had to cut short that visit. And I told the wife, if you continue like this, we won't be able to go. Each time she calls me, even last night, as at close to midnight, she called me and she was crying. She was crying.
If the need arises, are they willing, that's the DSS, to provide adequate medical care for him?
Yes, that yesterday evening when I was there, one of the personnel there told me that they have a good and world-class medical facility that they will take him there to treat today. But in the next 1 hour or thereabouts, I should be with him to confirm whether he has been given that medical attention that he urgently requires.
Mr. Douglas, thank you very much for joining us on Political Platform.
You are welcome, sir.
Uju, the ordeal of journalists.
The ordeal of this profession. I remember what some of us went through during the June 12 crisis. To you were in it, I was there. And we know what a lot of journalists suffered. People like Babafemi Ojudu, who went to prison for 2 years for committing no crime, but simply because he was doing his job. And a whole lot of us, we didn't go to prison, but we know the condition under which we lived at that time. And to think that we can even understand that that was a military era, but to think that things like this would be happening in a democracy, a hard-fought democracy, that journalists are easily the champion of the democracy that Nigeria enjoys today, and we're being subjected to this kind of treatment. It calls for, it sends very negative messages. You recall also
no, Uju, let's join. Let's speak with the National Secretary of Nigerian Union of Journalists, the umbrella organization of journalists in the country, Usman Liman. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for calling me.
Yeah, the union issue a statement. Beyond the statement you have issued, we've just spoken with the lawyer of Tony, and he said they are threatening that they will charge him for terrorism. When does writing become a terrorist act?
Well, you know, these are antics of government. Whenever government is becoming increasingly intolerant of media criticisms and media coverage of activities, they devise means to try to silence the media. Charging him with terrorism or with any other crime for that matter will not hold. And I'm sure it will ultimately be thrown out of court. We are waiting for that. If they had charged him since last week, we could have put this thing behind us by now. So we are still waiting to see what will happen.
So what efforts have you been making to ensure that he regains his freedom?
Well, I will not discuss on this platform, but let me say that we have made a lot of interventions. We have engaged certain government officials. Unfortunately, like I said, government is increasingly becoming intolerant, and it is obvious that we are dealing with a system and with people that will not obey due process and will not obey the laws of the country.
Yeah,
we have received assurances last week that he will regain his freedom. Unfortunately, that is not so.
Just before we allow you to go, you rose from the status of a reporter and became an editor of one of the national newspapers before you became the National Secretary of Nigerian Union of Journalists. Yes. How right is it for security agencies to be forcing and compelling a journalist that he must disclose his source of information?
Of course, they will try to force journalists to disclose their sources of information, but the journalists have a right not to divulge these sources of information. And And I am encouraging Tony not to do so because his credibility rests on that. And then, of course, the credibility of his editors and his newspaper. So he should not divulge. It is his right, and nobody can trample on that right.
Mr. Usman Liman, thank you very much for joining us on Political Platform.
Thank you for calling.
Well, would you? We are going to watch closely what happens or what becomes of this case of Tony EZIMAKO's case, and something that we'll be following on this program.
Apart from that, I think that the journalists need to go even beyond that to ensure that these repressive tendencies do not continue. If you recall, the Nigerian journalist based in the UK that was also detained in December. For how long will this continue?
Yeah, for how long will it continue? We hope that people will realize the fact that we are no longer in a military regime. On that note, we end today's program. We thank you for always remaining with us, for joining us, and we will return tomorrow and give you more information about political happenings within Nigeria and across the world. Thank you very much.
Busted.